Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Benny Becker. Thrilled as always, gang, as you know, to be sitting right here talking Baltimore Orioles baseball with all of you. So excited. Fantastic episode we have on our hands. Not necessarily the most positive episode, guys. I'm just going to be realistic. Not necessarily going to be optimistic a lot on this podcast, but we do have optimism in the air, even through a tough start for these Orioles. This episode, we're going to be talking about the Royals series we're coming out of, the team's inconsistencies, welcoming back Gunnar Henderson, and other injury news. Torpedo bats, the talk of Major League Baseball right now. Maybe a possible trade that's in the works, and plenty more to get to on this episode, gang. For those new viewers or people who have been with us for a while but not following us on social media, make sure you go follow us at Talkin Orioles Baseball on Instagram, TikTok, and X. We're going to have a lot of good content this season coming your way on those platforms, so make sure you check us out on there. But no further ado, we got to jump into this episode. We have a lot of big things to talk about, gang. We're going to start with the Royals series. It was cold, wet, and windy out in Kansas City as these Orioles essentially got BarBQ'd this past weekend. And it wasn't the best series, clearly, if we got BarBQ'd. But let's break it down per game. We did see a lot of good stuff that we're going to touch on throughout breaking down these games. All right, so let's just start game one. An 8-2 loss. It turned into the Orioles' third straight loss, coming off of two straight losses to end the Boston series. That game one was very cold, very wet, and windy. It was not a pretty day whatsoever in Kansas City. Kind of a tough one to get through, but you got to persevere and grind through. The score was honestly 3-2 after 7 innings. So the Orioles were right there, gang. And then it got a little ugly. Cionel Perez came into the game. Royals ended up putting 5 on the board in that 8th inning. Kind of happened again. Cionel was not pitching his best, as we've seen throughout this short season so far. Gunnar Henderson had an error in that game, followed by this wacky play where it was a bloop into right, and Tyler O'Neill threw it to second instead of throwing to home, which caused Bobby Witt to go first to home and score. Ultimately, I don't think that run made the difference in the game. I think the game had already gotten away from the Orioles at that point, unfortunately. And it stinks. Like I said, 3-2 game after 7. It's right there for the taking. It felt kind of like we were going to find a way to win because, frankly, the past couple years, really 2.5 years, because you can date back to the second half of 3 years ago. And these Orioles just found a way to win. A lot of this core finds ways to win, whether it was that season, 2 seasons ago, last season. They just seem to find ways to win. And unfortunately, at the moment, they're not really finding those ways to win in games that are at least close at a time, at a point, in a breaking point where you could be the team to break it open. And then the other team is put in an big hole. Instead, unfortunately, the Orioles are the ones who let up the big inning in this game, and they wind up losing, like I said, 8-2. Dean Kramer got the start that day. He only went 4 1/3 innings, allowed 8 hits, didn't walk a man, which was nice. Only 1 strikeout, 2 earned runs on Dean Kramer's line. So Dean Kramer essentially did his job. Was it pretty? No. Was he able to pitch as deep as we would like into the game? Certainly not. 1 out into the 5th inning is not where you want to get the pitchers pulled. But ultimately, like we say about this starting staff, especially right now, their job is just to keep us in it, gang. Their job isn't necessarily to go out and completely shut down the other team. It's to get the game to a 3-2 game in the 7th inning. 8th inning. And that's when you can go and get the game. So, frankly, while I'm not overwhelmed by Dean Kramer's start, it's at the very least a step in the right direction for him and a positive sign for Dean Kramer. Out of the bullpen, Gregory Soto continues his dominating year, 1 2/3 innings, no earned runs. Sir Anthony Dominguez also continues his dominating start to the season, 1 inning, no earned runs. Cionel Perez, though, like we said, was the guy that got dinged up, and that's been the case so far for Cionel this season. In this game, he gave up 1 earned run, 3 hits, 1 walk, 1 inning pitched, 5 earned runs, 1 walk, 1 K, 3 hits. So letting guys on, letting them score. Again, not all of those runs, even if they're earned, are actually Cionel's fault. But certainly you get into a bad jam, you can't fault anybody but yourself when those runs come across. Orioles in the game left 5 guys in scoring position, 1 for 6 on the day. And frankly, again, we could have tied or taken the lead and maybe won the game. And if that 8th inning doesn't get away from us, maybe we find a way to battle in the 9th. We'll never know because the game got away and there was no battling in the 9th. I believe Mullins did get on base. So again, if you're only down by 1 and you get Cedric Mullins on base, you have the makings of the chance to at least tie the game in the 9th. Again, that wasn't the case, gang. Now, game 2, we're back on this seesaw as we've been all season, and we'll touch more on that later in the episode. But game 2, the Orioles win not only big, but convincingly. 8-1 win against the Royals. Tomo Sagano got the start. It was great what we saw from him. But let's start with the offense. 8 of the 9 Orioles starters, got a hit. The only starter who didn't get a hit was Gunnar Henderson. That's going to probably continue, or that will continue at least through this episode. Hopefully, by next episode, it has not continued. 5 different Orioles got an RBI. Mountcastle, Holiday, and Gary Sanchez all drove in 2. Heston and Urias drove in 1. We were 2-0 through 5, and then the Orioles put up 4 in the 6th, 2 in the 7th, and really got a commanding lead at that point. 5 for 15 runners in scoring position, so not the best. But when you're getting 15 guys in scoring position and you drive in a third of them, it's usually good enough, gang. Obviously, you'd like to see that percentage a little better. But again, if you're going to get that many guys and runners in scoring position, you got to drive in at least 5 of them, which the Orioles did. So like I said, Tomo's second start in Major League Baseball, and he was way more comfortable. That was the quote from Brandon Hyde. Tomo's line ultimately was 5 1/3 innings, 5 hits, 1 walk, 4 Ks, only an earned run off a Bobby Witt Jr. home run. It was his first Major League win, and the Orioles celebrated it. You know, normally you wouldn't celebrate a random regular season win. Really, you wouldn't even celebrate a guy's first career win that much usually. But Tomo being such this professional pitching veteran, this legend in Japan, and coming over and finally getting his first win in this second start, the Orioles celebrated, gave him a beer shower, sat him in the laundry cart, poured beer on him. It was fun. It was enjoyable. Certainly, again, the vibes haven't been the best to start this season because of how frustrating maybe it's been between injury, inconsistent play, and losses. So it's nice when the guys can get a little victory. Not even in the win column like they did, but more moral-wise. Give you some reason to celebrate instead of just being a little frustrated, even if you win, still remembering the past 3 games and being frustrated off of those past 3 games. We did see Tomo use his whole arsenal, his 6 pitches, 5 of which he threw double-digit times. And that's just kind of the beauty of Tomo Sagano. He has this large arsenal that he trusts in. So Again, 4, if not 5 of those pitches, every start, he's going to be throwing double-digit amount of times. Just makes it very tough on the hitters because you really can't pick up the patterns as well. And especially the more comfortable he starts getting with Rushman and Sanchez and just the Orioles pitching staff, Drew French and everybody around there, we're going to be seeing an even better mix. And even the opposite hitters really not being able to figure out the pattern when they really get everything settled. It was really nice to see from Tomo. He was really nervous, it felt like, in that first start. So it seemed like he was more comfortable, more loose. Didn't have to come out of the game because of hand cramps. I really loved what I saw from Tomo this past start, and it gives me hope that he can be the guy that I was talking about him being coming into the season. Being that veteran presence, keeping your team in these games, maybe not having the flashiest stat line or the most strikeouts, but just even when guys are getting off a base, eliminating the damage that occurs off of that and keeping your team in the ball game to allow them to hit yourself to victory. So that was great to see, a great game 2. Unfortunately, those vibes did not continue into game 3. I don't know if some of the Orioles drank too much of that beer that was involved in that beer shower. Just kind of joking. I'm sure they weren't hungover, but you never know. Major League Baseball has a funny way of doing that to you at times, and guys go out randomly in these cities and get a little banged up sometimes, gang. I know these Orioles are very focused and very driven. That doesn't mean that they don't like to cut back and have some fun. You never know when that occurs unless you're on the road trip with the Orioles. So, frankly, who knows, gang? But they came out very flat in game 3. Certainly, out of the gate, very flat on both sides. Hitting-wise, it was very, very ugly. But let's talk about the pitching and defense because I think that tells more of the story, at least, from that game. So it started off on the very first defense, or play on defense. Tyler O'Neill, there was a sharp line drive to right field, made a great diving catch on the first Royals batter. Unfortunately, the second Royals batter hit one into right center, more towards center. Mateo, who was playing just, I believe, his 21st or 24th or something along those lines, games in center field, unfortunately misplayed the ball. Definitely should have been able to get to it, certainly with his athletic ability. The catch probability was in the 90s. Mateo does not get to the ball, and Witt winds up all the way at third base. They ruled it a triple like you're seeing a lot of these rulings so far this season in Major League Baseball. Typically, in the past, that would have been an error, but neither here or there. Witt gets the triple, winds up on third. That would have made it 2 outs. The Royals end up putting 3 up in that first inning, and it looked like they were going to just continue putting up crooked numbers on Cade Povich at that point. Povich was putting the ball in the zone, but way too in the zone. He wasn't living on the edges. He was just kind of peppering it right down the middle. It looked like he had control issues, but again, not with the ability to throw strikes, just the ability to throw quality strikes, which is going to be an issue when you're facing major league hitters. Now, the Royals end up putting a couple more on base in that second inning, do drive in a run, but that was the last run the Royals got of the whole game. And the Royals didn't stop putting guys on base. So Cade Povich, while, again, he didn't have the best control that you want out of a major league starter. He had the type of control that's going to get you hit a lot and put into trouble, which he was. He worked himself out of those jams. And that's the difference in this Cade Povich to last year's Cade Povich. Because when I read you this stat line by Cade Povich, you're going to see that if he did this last year, not only would he not have pitched the 6 innings that he did pitch, but he would have allowed a lot more than the 4 runs he did, right? So Povich's line at the end of the day was 6 innings, 13 hits, no walks, 4 Ks, 4 earned runs. 13 hits, though, and a lot of hard hits, especially giving up 3 in the first inning. Cade Povich last year, especially in the beginning of his major league career, would have folded, would have crumbled under that circumstance, under that pressure. And the Royals would have ended up putting up 6 or 8 in the first 2 or 3 innings. As it stands, Povich not only continued to get out of jams, but he became only the second Orioles starting pitcher to pitch 6 innings this season. Now, early in the season, maybe you're going to take guys out a little bit early and not necessarily push them to their limits. And we've seen the Orioles be cautious with taking pitchers out. You know, maybe when their pitch is not necessarily as high as typically you might run them. In fact, I think Cade Povich only had 88 pitches in those 6 innings. So technically, he could have come out for the 7th, at least a batter or 2, if you wanted him to. Now, we've seen Zach Eflin twice pitch 6 innings and given us 2 very good starts in those starts. But besides him, Povich is now the only other Oriole starter for the moment to pitch 6 innings. And he showed a lot of grit and toughness in that game. Again, there were multiple opportunities where the game could have gotten away from him. Clearly, he was letting up a lot of hits. Over 2 hits an inning on average. That didn't all just come in the first and second inning, gang. They were continuing to hit him throughout. And he didn't necessarily have complete strikeout stuff, only 4 Ks. But we did see him very much getting used to that changeup, that new jumping changeup or whatever they're calling it right now. It's kind of this different grip, almost half knuckle curve, half change. They were breaking it down on the game where basically you're not rotating. It's more just coming out of your hand normal, but because of how you're holding it, it's this exploding or whatever changeup that they're talking about. And Povich looked like he had great feel for it, at least after the first inning or 2 in that game. It was a game-changing pitch for him. It was the pitch that allowed him to stay in the game that long and to actually have some pretty good success in that game. Kansas City was 3 for 10 with runners in scoring position, and 9 of those 10 runners in scoring position were against Povich. So, again, there were guys on base, guys in runners in scoring position. And Povich worked himself out of those jams, showed a lot of, honestly, calmness, and showed a lot of poise. The type that you expect to see out of the Tomos and the Saganos and the Eflins and these veteran pitchers that we were talking about being these guys coming into this year. We're kind of seeing it a little from Slim right now. And it's great. It's the type of attitude they said Povich had in camp this year. And that we talked being so excited about hearing about. Because that's how you wind up being a successful major league pitcher, is being able to work yourself out of jams. Not having your best stuff in the beginning of the game, maybe even getting tagged hard early. And trusting the process, finding what works, and getting out of jams when you find themselves in it. And keeping your team in the ball game. Exactly what we just talked about with Kramer and Sagana. Truly. All right, so the Orioles' bats in that game, though, were pretty quiet really all day. We only had 5 hits, 3 of which came from Ryan Mountcastle. Now, we're facing Bubic, who we talked a little about coming in, said he had some good stuff and that he could be a good pitcher some days. He was a great pitcher against us. It was a lefty, so we went with an all-righty lineup outside of Gunnar Henderson. And you know, you'd go, oh, that sounds obvious. Like, there shouldn't be second guessing in that. But actually, Brandon Hyde has gotten second guessed a lot in the past 24 hours for that decision, for not adding in a couple more lefties. We saw it make an effect in the field. If you have Cedric Mullins in the game instead of Mateo in center, you probably don't get that whip ball dropping. Who knows then if the Royals even score in the first inning? So at that point, gang, you have to look at it where not only it's result oriented. The righties mostly all got shut down, including Jorge Mateo. You didn't have more lefties in the lineup. And when you look at Kyle Bubic, especially, they were talking about this nonstop throughout the broadcast, is that he tends to be a reverse splits pitcher. So lefties actually hit better against him than righties. If you actually watched the game, though, right? If you actually were watching Bubic, clearly the righties were struggling. I don't know if the lefties would have had much better success. Like I said, Gunnar was in the lineup, and he did not perform well against Bubic. I don't know if these lefties really would have had any more success. However, if you have Cedric and Heston, let's say, instead of Mateo and Laureano, who knows? Like, Cedric Mullins has shown the ability to hit left-handed pitching at times in his career. And he's very hot. Heston Kjerstad, we won't know if he can hit left-handed pitching unless we really continue to give him those opportunities. And with Kowser on the IL right now, what better time to give Heston Kjerstad some of those opportunities? Then you also obviously have Jackson Holliday, who could have been in the game. And again, if you're not giving Holliday the opportunities to hit these lefties, how are you ever going to, one, know if he can do it successfully, and two, allow him to learn how to do it successfully? And frankly, if you're telling me he's a star, which I think he is, stars don't sit against lefties. A Corey Seager doesn't sit against left-handed pitching. A Gunnar Henderson doesn't sit against left-handed pitching. So if you're telling me Jackson's going to be a star, and I think he is. If you're telling me Heston could be a star, and I think he could be. If you're telling me Cedric Mullins is still a star, and I can buy into that based off of how he started this year, you should put your best lineup forward. Now, I think the other note on the other side of the foot, or on the other foot, if you will, is the fact that we are going to be facing at least 5 straight, if not more, righty starting pitchers. So all those lefties I just talked about are going to be in the lineup, if not all, most of at least the next 5 games. Okay. So then I can get a little more behind it. And again, if you saw how Bubic was throwing on Sunday, I don't know if you can make the argument that his career splits righty-lefty would have been just as effective. Because I think lefties would have struggled just as much, if not more, to hit Bubic yesterday. Again, if you actually watch it, it looked tough, man. He's got kind of a funky delivery. He hides the ball well. And the ball was electric yesterday. I don't know if those lefties would have had any more success. However, having Mullins in center, or at the very least, switching Laureano and Mateo and having Laureano play center and Mateo play on the corner could have maybe cost you the game. Again, if you have a normal center fielder who's comfortable out there, even with tough Kansas City wins, I think he gets to that ball. I know Mullins would have gotten that ball. I expect Laureano to have gotten that ball. And frankly, before it happened, I would have expected Mateo to get to that ball. It sucks, gang. I think Kowser would have gotten to the ball too, if he was out there. So, it changes the course of the game. And you never know how it would have played out either way. But when you only score 1 run, and they only get 1 run after that first inning, you can't help but think, hey, we might have been in a 1-1 headed to extras game. Overall, though, the Orioles did not take advantage of their opportunities. 0 for 2 runners in scoring position. Only run was on a wild pitch. Mountie got to third and wound up coming home. Now, he shouldn't have even been at third. It was on another one of those that should have been an error, but this year wasn't ruled an error, and we've seen that a lot in the league. So, again, the glove taketh, the glove giveth. So, what can you do? It worked both ways. Ultimately, the Orioles lose that game 4-1 and drop the finale and the series in Kansas City. And really, it's been the story of the Orioles season so far through these first 10 games is inconsistent play, gang. And that brings us to our next topic. 4-6 in their first 10 games. Certainly not drastically terrible. You look at a team like the Braves, who are like 1-7 or 1-8, I think, or something along those lines. And yeah, that would be a horrible start. This is just not a great start. And really, it's due to inconsistencies. Up, down, up, down. It's this seesaw we've talked about the past 2 episodes, where it's just this whole season has been win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Clearly, they lost 3 straight at some point. But other than that, it's just been this back and forth, back and forth. To quote Brandon Hyde on it, we definitely had opportunities to win some games that we've lost. So that's frustrating. Today's frustrating. This was after yesterday's game. First game of the series here was frustrating. We can play a lot better baseball. And they can. And I expect them to as well. And we're going to break it down into the few categories. Mainly, it's going to be offensive that we're going to talk about. If you look at the runs that they've scored, it is drastic how different the wins and losses have been. It's almost mind-blowing, the numbers I'm about to read to you. In their 6 losses, they have 10 runs. You're like, okay, well, that makes sense. That's like a normal number in a loss, averaging whatever, a run and a half, 2 runs a game. Okay. In their 4 wins, they've scored 37 runs. They're like, it's an outrageous number. You're going from 1.5 to 9. 1.5 runs on a loss, 9 runs in a win. It's something has to give. Somewhere in the middle, reality lies for this Orioles team. And again, this is small sample size. So it could just be stupid luck/unluck. It could be signs of a bigger problem. The Orioles have yet to win consecutive games this season. They have not scored they have not scored 3 or more runs in consecutive games, gang. And again, that just goes hand in hand. If you win one, lose one, win one, lose one, and you're scoring a lot of runs in the wins and not a lot of runs in the losses, that's just going to be how it is. They had 10 home runs in their first 3 games. Since then, they have a single home run in 7 games. Now, we were talking up this team to potentially lead the majors in home runs this season. The loss of Cowser maybe takes away that thought some, but still, you fully expect this to be one of the most power-happy teams in the league. Again, it's a small sample size. And if you look at the last 7 games, the last 3 were in Kansas City with very wacky wins. Not only does Kansas City naturally play as a pitcher's park and anti-home run, but when you have the whipping hard wins that we had, especially in day 1 and 2, but also in that 3rd game, home runs are going to be few and far between, even for a team like the Orioles that can match them with the best of them. So really, then that becomes a little less worrisome. Certainly, weather can play a factor early in on this season when it comes to home runs. Once it starts getting nice and warm, the ball travels farther. You don't have that rain or moisture as much in the air necessarily. The air is just not as heavy and thick as it is when the weather's bad. Certainly on the very humid days, you have humidity, and that makes the air thick. But, the ball can still travel on a humid day. It's tough if you look at that game on Friday in Kansas City, game 1, to even possibly conceive really hitting a home run in those conditions with the wind and the rain and all of that. So, again, small sample size. We saw what they did in the first 3 games and what they're capable of. I would expect more of that to come as far as successful home runs. We're headed to Arizona now. It's more of a homer-friendly park, I believe. Certainly the weather, it being a dome and it being in a desert, certainly helps the ball carry. So don't be surprised if in the desert, whether the Orioles win or lose, we start seeing the home runs come to life for this Orioles club. The Orioles, though, are also grounding into a ton more double plays than they did last year. Last year, not only were they the best team when it came to grounding into the fewest double plays, they actually set the Major League record for fewest double plays grounded into in a season. If I remember right, it was 71. I would say this year they already have 10. Again, I didn't write down the numbers. I was going to, but at a certain point, you can tell. If you've watched the games, you can tell they've been grounding into a lot of double plays. Certainly more than they did last year. So I don't have to give you the exact statistics. All I can say is that we played 10 games, and we already have like 15% of our total from last year. That's not great. That's not great, gang. That needs to change. But also with the home run balls comes less double plays typically. You're hitting the ball in the air more. So if you're playing more that style of we think we can hit home runs today because it's nice or it's hot or it's not wet, then you're probably going to hit into less double plays. So hopefully these are just things that the Orioles need to focus on improving in this early part of the season. And by May, hopefully, a lot of these problems have sorted themselves back out. And we've moved more towards the median. And frankly, again, baseball is a game of averages, right? So you could argue, okay, we are on pace to average this, or we are on pace to ground into this many double plays at this point. That's unacceptable. I'm sure it would be if you broke that number down by average, right? But that's not always the case. In fact, if you look at last year's Orioles, again, the best in Major League Baseball history, and you find a little middle ground between that and kind of what a top team usually scores, which I think is in like the low to mid 80s, we actually might have a lot less double plays coming our way than right now it looks like, gang. Just by sheer averages with how baseball works and how things average themselves out. Also, you could probably argue that since we set the record last year, in the grand scheme of it, if we were one of the worst teams this year, then if you take the last 2 or 3 teams and average them together, they're an average team with it, and that makes sense as well. Listen, this is all talking. This is all just jibber jabber, if you will, gang. There's no way to know other than to watch, to see what these Orioles do, and hope and expect them to do better than they've been doing. So when it comes to the starting pitching, we've talked about the inconsistencies. We know that at this point, only 2 guys have pitched 6 innings so far this season. And really, Cade Povich was almost lucky in many ways to be able to get to that point. Meanwhile, Eflin has been that guy, and hopefully Tomo and Morden at least will follow and get there as well, if not Kramer. But when you listen to Drew French talk, pitching coach Drew French, he talks about focusing on efficiency. You know, not just dilly-dallying, being like, hey, you need to get guys out quicker. That's not going to help. You need to really focus on the process and how they go about that and giving the steps. And again, this is all a process. And frankly, we've seen them be better. That's something we're going to talk about a little later in this episode. We've seen them already, if you take the first block of 5 starts and the second block of 5 starts, already the second block was improved off that first one. So it's a process. And also understanding that reinforcements are coming at some point between Graverod, Bradish, possibly Tyler Wells, Trevor Rogers. Some names that we're going to talk about in a couple segments as well when we get to injuries. But the guys that are in the rotation now have to perform at a level, or else they possibly might lose their spot when those names start coming back. Now we talk about the defense. We've talked about the Mateo incident, talked about a Gunnar error. The defense hasn't been great this season to begin. 5 errors on the season, 2 shy of the league lead where a bunch of teams are at. So certainly not historically bad by any means. And some of the errors were caused by really tough weather in Kansas City. Even the Mateo one. That wind was no joke this whole weekend. And so it's natural a guy with a little less experience might misread the ball. Heck, a guy with a lot of experience might misread the ball. We saw the Royals right fielder Hunter Renfroe misplay the Brian Mountcastle ball that wound up getting him to third. So that can happen in the bad weather games, especially in April. And last season, if you remember, if we go back a year ago, we were sitting here on this show talking basically the same thing about how you've had some shaky defense to start. And the Orioles seem to have started that way again this year. I think actually they started slightly better defensively than they did last year. But ultimately, it wasn't pretty last year either. You saw Tyler O'Neill throw to the wrong bag. That was something we saw last year, not with Tyler O'Neill, but just guys throwing the ball around crazily. We saw Cowser launch a couple balls last year, I remember. And it was one of these things where it's like you got to focus a little more. You got to tighten up. You got to be better in that defensive aspect. And I expect that to turn around. I expect that to get better. This is a very athletic team, top to bottom. And even the less athletic guys, O'Hearn, Mounty, Heston, are still very good athletes. Rushman, Sanchez, still very good athletes. And most, if not all, are plus to plus defenders, right? And they all have the tools to continue improving to be even better defensively. So expect the Orioles defense to really come back to the defense we've known the past few years and really be sound moving forward. Maybe even strictly after this KC series, at least defensively, it's a turn the page moment. And we're back to playing the way we're used to playing. Somewhat of a reality check moment between, again, the O'Neill throw, the Mateo problem, the just a couple plays here and there. Out of nowhere, you start to be like, hey, we need to get better. And we need to get better now. Because we know how to play good defense. And that's the thing. You don't necessarily need to learn anything new. You don't need to work on technique necessarily. You just need to remind yourself of the things that you have to do, the things you have to remember in those moments to accomplish the task at hand. That's all. And you know that, and they've done that, and they've been very good defensively. So expect to see the Orioles improve defensively. So that's kind of been their inconsistency. Like I said, back and forth, yo-yoing through the season so far. Hopefully, we can find some success in the desert coming up. The biggest sign and story, I think, from Kansas City was just welcoming back Gunnar Henderson. Just the force that he is on this team. Just truly obviously one of the best players on the field, but just mentality-wise, to have him out there, to see, I think, the confidence in the guys around having him back in that lineup. It's phenomenal. Now, did he play great? No. 1 for 13 in the series as a whole. 7 strikeouts. At one point, he had 5 straight at-bats with a strikeout. His only hit was an infield single. But there are positives, because when he did get the ball on the bat, he hit it very hard. In fact, he had 3 balls in just that first game alone hit over 104 miles an hour. two of which were for out, right at defenders, and then the other one was the infield single. But when you listen to Gunnar's quotes, it makes you really feel good about the direction that he's headed. Because he says, quote, "The at-bats felt good. Felt like I was in my legs. Glad to see. Felt like I was in a good spot." Which is fantastic, especially the legs part. Because a guy's not going to say that he feels like he was in his legs. He feels good where his legs are at and how he's feeling with them, unless that's actually the case. I mean, these guys are so particular. They're so, like, they're a precision machine, gang, right? They know their bodies in and out and how it feels. And you see guys all the time come back from injury and they know they're good enough to play, but they just don't feel right, especially in their legs. That's usually the last thing that feels right. Expect Gunnar to have a home run in this Diamondback series. That's all I'm saying. Whether he has a good series or not, I don't know. Expect him to hit one in the pool in right center in Arizona. I'm calling it right here, gang. I am calling it here. You heard it here first. Gunnar Henderson, home run ball, going swimming in the pool in Arizona. All right? And we have a lot of good baseball coming from Gunnar. I really do believe that. Again, maybe this series he still is struggling at times and doesn't have the best stat line, but it's coming. It really is. It's great to have him back, and I really think he's going to get right back in that MVP form very soon, if not as soon as tonight. So let's talk about some other injury notes. Like I said, Gunnar Henderson coming back. Few other guys working their way back. Grayson Rodriguez being probably at least the biggest name that's closest to returning, let's say. Because maybe he's not the biggest name on this list, but certainly the one with the closest return date for these Orioles. Still projected about end of this month, beginning of next month. I would even say maybe end of the first week, beginning of the second week of May to look for him. Again, they're going to be cautious, but we know he's thrown 2 bullpens already. He's scheduled for a 3rd bullpen today, and he's going to be throwing fastballs and changeup. So it's nice that the Orioles are letting him get feels for these pitches, for his repertoire a little. Still no breaking balls, but that's coming. That's probably the next step after today. So that's great. Clearly, we want him back. Now, again, where he slots in, where he fits in, we will see, gang. But that's a name that we expected to maybe be the opening day starter for us. And certainly the guy that has the best chance of being an ace for this team. Again, at least in the short window. Now, if we look long-term throughout the whole year, this next name might be, and probably is, the number 1 guy who has the best chance of being the Orioles' ace down the stretch and into the postseason, and that's Kyle Bradish, working himself back from that Tommy John surgery he got last year. Still no timetable on Bradish, so don't expect anything. I know last time we were talking August-ish. We'll see about that. But we are seeing great things as he's throwing from flat ground still. But he's been touching 90 miles an hour from that flat ground. I believe Bradish was averaging about 94 on his fastball last year. And again, that's from the mound. So naturally, it seems like his velocity is right where it was last year. If not, maybe even a tick or two higher. So we'll see. It's very exciting, his ramp up. But again, he's not even ramping up yet. He's kind of just rehabbing still, frankly. He's still in that rehab process. And hopefully, who knows, this continues progressing well. And maybe we get him back sooner. Remember last year, it wasn't rehabbing off of Tommy John, but when he got shut down in camp, him and John Means, they were projected to come back a lot later than they actually did come back. I don't have the exact dates in my head or in front of me right now of when he came back and when he was projected to come back, but they beat that projection at least by a couple weeks, if not by a month plus. So maybe August-ish isn't really the projection. And maybe we could get Kyle Bradish back around June, July. That'd be exciting, gang. That'd be exciting. Because when Kyle Bradish is healthy, he's a Cy Young candidate for this team. And the ace that, frankly, it feels like maybe we're missing. Still, the idea of projecting towards the end of this season and having a staff that at the very least at the top involves Bradish, Grayrod, and Eflin is a great three. I think probably Tomo you can add in there as being great. And based off of what we saw from Povich and how he seems to be better mentally, at least in working himself out of jams, who knows, maybe him too. And I'd love to see Dean Kramer. Then you also have the other names that are coming back as well. Our next one being Trevor Rogers, who's actually been throwing bullpen sessions since the end of spring training and could be back even this month. Now, I know Birdland isn't going to go nuts over the idea of getting Trevor Rogers back. Certainly, when we traded for him last year, it was a bust last year. He got hit around. He got shut down. He might have even got sent down too, I believe. It did not work out last year. But the stuff is there in the sense of we've seen it before work in the majors. And the Orioles are very good about wrapping their hands around these pitchers and molding them into a guy that can be successful and be the best version of himself. Is Trevor Rogers a starter for us? I don't know where the spot would be at the moment, but he could make sense in the bullpen. Again, we've seen Cionel Perez struggle. We've seen Albert Suarez not only struggle, but get injured and be put on the injured list. So, listen, these are all spots that guys have to perform to keep that spot because there's a lot of guys on their heels. So the last injury note we're going to talk about is from the farm back down in the minor leagues. Sam Basallo, say it ain't so, got hurt the other day. Already he was dealing with elbow inflammation, and so he wasn't catching. He was only DHing. He got removed on the 4th due to a hamstring discomfort. I haven't really seen much of an update from there. I assume that's more a positive thing than a negative thing. I assume that if it was a serious hamstring injury, 1, they wouldn't call it discomfort, and 2, they would have announced by now that he did some major damage to it. At this point, I feel like it's just maybe, a pulled hammy and he might need a couple weeks off, which is fine. It's not an issue. He was never going to get called up right now anyway, and maybe not at all this season. So it's not that big of a deal. It does feel like maybe Basallo is a little injury prone. Maybe it's just dumb luck, or bad luck, but it feels like Basallo might have this injury issue because things just keep popping up. He dealt with the elbow injury last year. That's why he wasn't catching in spring training, only DHing. Now he's dealing with a similar elbow injury, maybe not as bad, but certainly another one. I could certainly see this developing to where he winds up just being primarily a first baseman and probably more just a DH at some point. And I don't think that's an overreaction. Maybe it is. Maybe it's still early because he's still so young and developing and frankly probably still growing as a person. So that could kind of result in injuries too. If you're still growing as a person and you're playing professional baseball and training to get yourself to the major leagues, you could easily pull a hamstring because, again, your hamstring may have grown or whatever. It may be a little tender because it grew overnight. I don't know. Still, maybe that's stupid. I don't know. But I feel like that's probably accurate. What do I know? Anyway, I've compared him a lot to guys like Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez. These are guys who primarily, at a certain point in their career, just played first base and DH. Now, that was a little later. We saw Miggy play third and even in the outfield. Victor Martinez, I believe, played a little in the field as well, maybe only at first base, maybe some catcher. A Sal Perez was able to stick a catcher even at this age, which is amazing. He's been playing more first base and DH as well these past few years. And again, he's obviously older. I think one of those three guys is kind of the mold for him. And we're going to see more if he's Sal Perez, who can continue catching throughout his career and play other positions. If he's Victor Martinez, where it seemed like he was pretty much a DH for a while, or then you have Miguel Cabrera, where he played throughout the field and, could play here or there and maybe wasn't great defensively in those other spots, but then moved to first base and was solid defensively and could DH as well, obviously. So we'll see. I still think profile-wise, he's kind of one of those three guys, or a mix of all three, which is a beautiful thing. You're talking about, I believe, three Hall of Famers. Certainly Miggy is a Hall of Famer. I would imagine Sal Perez is a Hall of Famer. And then I can't remember if Victor Martinez has or has not been voted in, but certainly he's a guy that's up for consideration if he did not get it. So those are the injury notes. So now let's talk about how it's too early to panic. Or is it? Because I know Birdland's kind of panicking right now, gang. And I don't necessarily blame you guys. But I think after 10 games, we've seen really good and we've seen pretty bad. And understanding that, again, somewhere in the middle, reality lies. And I think that we're going to sway more towards that really good when everything gets going. So these O's were built to win by scoring a bunch of runs, playing decent defense, having quality starts, keeping us in it, and having a lockdown bullpen. Some would say that formula has been proved faulty already. But again, small sample size. Things aren't all in place. You didn't have maybe your best player on the entire team with the team up until 3 games ago. Your star closer is still working himself back. The defense started out a little shaky, especially with some tough weather. The starting pitching wasn't that quality that first go around, and the second go around was better quality, at least. Maybe not the quality we want, but better. Now, the Orioles, when you look at numbers, still seem like they have a great offense. Top 10 in runs, top 10 in batting average, on base percentage, and weighted runs created. So basically, some of the top offensive metrics, the Orioles are all top 10 in. So it's easy to just look at it on face value and be like, oh, we're fine. But it's not as good as it was early last year. But it's still good. Okay? Like, the offense came out electric at the start of last year. This year, again, it's been very inconsistent. Very boom or bust. And let's just break down the Orioles' runs per game and just show you how up and down it is. Start with 12, go to 2, go to 9, go to 1, go to 8, go to 0, go to 4, go to 2, go to 8, go to 1. I mean, it's literally just a zigzag, gang. So these things have to figure itself out. They've scored 2 or fewer runs in 5 of the 10 games, but 8 or more runs in 4 of the 10 games. Just a mind-blowingly inconsistent numbers being thrown at you. And frankly, again, they're built on this offense winning them games, really, and the pitching and defense keeping them in games for the offense to win them. So really, a top 10 offense is not necessarily good enough. It isn't scratching the team's potential. They're built to be much better. They're built to be a top 5, top 3, top 1 offense in baseball. Now, the numbers for the starting staff, as by no surprise, are ugly. An ERA of 5.62, 26th in Major League Baseball. Opponent's batting average of 3.01, and a whip of 1.49. The starters have been very poor. But again, they did better in their second performance than they did their first go-around. So, frankly, the past 5 games, they've mainly been living up to their end of the bargain. And the Orioles hitters just have not gotten it done for the most part. And if you look top to bottom at the bullpen, it's been mostly solid. Now, the problem is there's a lack of close games. So they're not really being tested in the way that they're going to be tested throughout this season. That could be positive or negative. A guy like Cionel Perez, who's gotten hit around this year, could benefit from being in a closer, tight game. Maybe. But also, guys like maybe Soto are going to not benefit from maybe the game being closer. Again, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe Soto's having the best season of his career, and he's going to be one of the best lefties in baseball this year. And maybe Cionel Perez is coming to the end of his Orioles run. Both are possibilities. And it's not an either-or thing. Like, it could be both, it could be either. It could be neither. So we'll see. The Orioles, though, are the only team right now without a save opportunity. Kind of amazing. Kind of crazy. I almost don't believe it. I should have looked more into it, but it's what it said. Now, despite all of that, why is it not time to panic? Well, we talked about how the starting pitchers, I think, will be better. We talked about how the bullpen is already really good. Talked about how we expect the defense, just like last year, to kind of reset itself and turn itself back into being a very, very good defensive team. Well, what about the offense? Because the offense needs to be more consistent. Well, guys who struggled last year have really been good so far. So that's something to be optimistic about. Guys like Mullins, Westy, Adley, Jackson are all outperforming where they at least ended last year. Gunnar obviously missed the first 7 games, came back for the last 3, but he's going to hit his stride and hopefully be able to find even another level to his offense off of last year. Be even better offensively, possibly, than he was last year, or at the very least, be a similar player to how he was last year. Eventually, we're going to get back Colton Cowser as well. That just adds more talent, especially, I love me some Colton Cowser. I was predicting some major home run numbers from that kid this season. So, while he's going to miss 2 months, I still think he could wind up having himself a pretty solid year when he gets back. Really, though, the output is there. It just needs some better timing. I mean, we talked about in a lot of these losses, you have runners in scoring position, 0 for 2, 1 for 5, 1 for 6. Like, you're not getting it done. Even the successful ones, 5 for 15. Ultimately, you'd probably like to see be a little better, 6 or 7 for that 15. Listen, again, you go 5 for 15 runners in scoring position, you're feeling pretty good. Still, you just want to be as good as possible, gang. That's what it's really about. And hopefully, moving forward, considering that this team is built to hit top to bottom in the lineup, you can start driving in those guys when they get on base. Because you're not so worried about, oh, we got a guy on base, but our 8 hitters up. That's all right. Our 8 hitters probably pretty dang good. So is our 9. And then you get back to the top. And this is a team that can absolutely do damage. We've seen that this season. We just need to find the consistency. And I expect them to. I really do. Now, while the starters have shown room to grow, they've also shown improvement already, right? So there's still some left to be desired, but we've seen the improvement by these guys. And the Gray Rod addition shortly, hopefully, knock on wood, in the next couple weeks, will only add to that. Then hopefully you eventually add Kyle Bradish back to that as well. And now you have a rotation that you can feel really good about. Really. especially in the postseason when you're only pitching 3 or even 4 of them. Now you look at it and go, I feel great about the 4 we got. I do. If you're going into a playoff series with Bradish, Grayrod, Eflin, and Tomo, gang, already I'm excited about that. Already I feel good about that. So frankly, we're still right in the thick of it, gang. You can't win it this early, but you could certainly lose it this early. You just have to stay in the hunt long enough to catch fire once you get healthy and finish the year hot so then you can go into the playoffs hot. We talked about this the past couple episodes. I'd rather start slow and end hot than start hot and end slow. We saw how that worked last year. Not very well. And we lost to those Royals just like we did this past weekend. We don't want that again, gang. We want to start winning in the postseason. So it's okay to let these guys figure it out early, but just stay in the hunt. Live around that 500 number even. Stay in that hunt and wait for your time, and then you can go. And then you blink, and the Orioles are towards and at the top of not only the division, but the league in general. So there was a story that popped up last week I wanted to talk about that I need to bring back because it's something that's, one, interesting, but also kind of a little sad to talk about, but makes you question about where this team is going to be at roster-wise at the end of the season and moving forward. So apparently, MLB trade rumors reported Ryan Mountcastle has been on the block. The O's have been letting other clubs know that Mountie is available in trade talks. Now, there's absolutely no indication at the moment that a deal is close or even that talks are continuing. Just that the Orioles reached out and let other clubs know that he could be available. It makes sense also that maybe that was the case in spring training or the offseason. And now that the season has started, especially how it started with the Orioles in some ways, you could argue that the Orioles maybe have told teams that we're going to table it for a little, maybe for a month, maybe till the trade deadline, and then revisit it down the line. Certainly, though, he's an intriguing guy to some teams around the league. A lot of teams could use an upgrade at first base. And he's 28 years old. He's under contract through next season. There's a lot to like about Mountcastle. Not only does he have a great personality, he's a great locker room guy, a great clubhouse guy, but he's also this leader, but he's also just one of the guys. He can connect to these younger players. He was in that Airbnb with Gunnar and Adley and Kalzer and a lot of these younger players. And then you had a guy like Mountcastle and Eflin, who were also in the house. I believe Heston was in the house too. I'm not positive, but neither here or there. He's just one of these guys that he can get along with those younger guys while still being a veteran and still being a mentor. And I don't know if we've seen the best Ryan Mountcastle yet. Truly, again, he's 28 years old. He's just kind of in the heat of his prime. Still has a few years left at least, you would think, in his prime. I think a lot has to do with how Kobe Mayo performs this season. If Kobe Mayo was torching the ball this spring, Orioles may have pulled the trigger then. If Kobe Mayo had started out even this AAA season hot and Mountie wasn't hot, then maybe it would have happened in the first week or two. Truly. I think, though, how each of those guys have performed has kind of allowed the Orioles to take a step back and not rush this decision. Because Kobe Mayo, we know, struggled in spring, has struggled also so far in his season. I think that if he starts to dominate and forces his hand, things could change. But that hasn't been the case so far this season. And frankly, Mountcastle is still very consistent with hitting, batting .324 so far this season. But we need to really start seeing him hit for power, I think, for the Orioles to want to keep him for the rest of this year and maybe even for next year. Because if you look at his power numbers the past few seasons, they have gone down each season. Now, you could blame the ball in left field, but frankly, he probably lost no more than 5 home runs a season to that left field wall. And the reality is it probably was only 2 to 3 each of those years. Okay? So let's break down his power numbers by year. In 2021, he had 33 dingers. 2022, he had 22 dingers. 2023, he had 18 dingers. 2024, he had 13 dingers. And this season so far, he has none. So you start to wonder, gang, is he the guy the Orioles need there? Or is the addition of Coby Mayo taking that spot and those at-bats a better use of not only the roster spot, but just better for the organization as a whole? It's going to do better on the stat sheet, is going to provide more wins, is going to help Coby Mayo's career as well take off and ascend. And listen, I'm not going to get too deep into Coby Mayo here, but you know that Coby Mayo I've kind of doubted at times for his herky-jerky motion and wondering if he can keep that going. I had a bit of an epiphany recently where I saw the similarities between how he swings with that, again, herky-jerky motion. It looks like he's behind and like it's something I think he needs to change, but then you equate that to Pete Alonso, and who also has that similar herky-jerky type swing and has had all this power success in the majors. You start wondering, gang. You start wondering if maybe that's a good comparison for Coby Mayo, as far as the herky-jerky swingness working out for him and being able to be successful in the majors. That's all to tell. I would hate to see Mountie go, but just like some other names, it happened, gang. Whether it's Austin Hayes, whether it's Santander, a lot of these guys, and you could even talk the Norby and Stowers that I loved, Hall and Ortiz and all these guys that I talked up and loved and then got dealt. It's the nature of the business. And frankly, the Orioles roster, how it's set up currently, is in a position to where they need to make some moves eventually, or guys are going to be seeing the end of their Orioles career come soon. We've already seen that happen with the likes I just mentioned, John Means, a whole bunch of names that we love. Still, though, he's one of the bros. He's one of the clubhouse leaders and vets for the team. And at the moment, I expect him to stay at least for this season and possibly be dealt in the offseason. All right, gang. So next, real quick, we want to progress you on Kyle Gibson, who the Orioles signed back a few weeks ago at the end of camp. Didn't have any camp with the Orioles, so obviously he needs to go through all of the steps. But it seems like he's tracking to join Norfolk very soon. He had a successful bullpen with three ups, 3 downs. Nice. Ran his way through that bullpen. Still has a couple weeks left at best, I would imagine. But he's another name, just like Grayrod, just like Rogers, and just like eventually Bradish, hopefully, and maybe Wells, that's going to be pushing for these rotation spots, and that the guys in the rotation need to hold off. So next we're going to have a little preview on the Arizona battle. First, tonight we get the battle of the Zacks, Eflin versus Gallen. Great matchup, truly. Gallen has been very good, but at times can be a little inconsistent. Last week, though, he had 13 Ks against the Yankees, so great performance by him against those Stankies. We love to see that. Zach Eflin, though, has been our ace so far this year and is going to continue being that until at least Grayrod gets back. Certainly the most consistent starting pitcher we have at the moment so far. Hopefully he can continue that going, keep this team in the game, and hopefully the bats can get hot and hit Gallen a little bit. So we'll see about that. Either way, very good pitching matchup tonight. Tomorrow we have Charlie Morton versus Merrill Kelly. Morton has been shaky, but at least getting strikeouts, averaging over 14 Ks per 9. Very impressive stuff for him. I believe he had 10 strikeouts his last outing. Merrill Kelly, meanwhile, allowed a career high 9 runs last time out when he faced the Stankies. So Merrill Kelly coming off of his worst game ever. Hopefully he maybe has an even worse game tomorrow, or at the very least, continues getting hit around, and these Orioles can maybe pick up the first two headed into the series finale. Kramer versus Brandon Pfaadt. I don't know how to say that kid's name. I think it's just Pfaadt. Pfaadt. If you know how to pronounce it differently, let me know. But we're going to call him Pfaadt tonight. And Dean Kramer has been struggling a little bit this season and needs to stack some good starts in order to keep that rotation spot when Grayrod or Gibson or whichever one of these pitchers is the first one back from injuries. Right now, Dean Kramer looks like he may be the odd man out. Could still be Cade Povich, but right now it's between those two. And again, if the Orioles need two spots, it looks like those are the two names on the chopping block. You need to see Dean Kramer really start stacking quality starts. Meanwhile, Brandon Pfaadt recently signed a 5-year, $45 million extension. One of these younger players signing this extension. He hasn't had the best stat line to his career so far, 15-20, 5.06 ERA, but he has great strikeout stuff. He really does. He really spins the ball well. So watch out for him on that game. Hopefully the Orioles can get to him. Maybe he's not putting the ball in the strike zone enough and walking guys and putting guys on base, and the Orioles can get to him that way. And hopefully Dean puts together a good game. And who knows? I could see the Orioles sweeping. I really could, gang. Could also see maybe the Orioles getting swept. That's just kind of how the Orioles have been playing so far this season. If I had to take a guess, I would go with kind of how they've been, which is win one, lose one, win one, which this series would work out to 2 wins, 1 loss. We'd go 3-3 on the road trip. And we talked about how we'd be okay with 3-3 on the road trip. Hopefully, though, maybe we could be even better. Hopefully, we can get to that 4-2 mark and sweep the D-backs in the desert. D-backs are a solid team. Tricky, obviously, in the World Series a couple years ago. This young team, really good pitching staff. Offensive players maybe a little streaky, whether it be Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll, obviously. They got some other guys spread throughout that team. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hopefully the Orioles can at least take 2 and, again, split the 6 games of this road trip before headed back to Baltimore. And hopefully they bring some nice weather with them back from Arizona. They pull some nice weather back from the West Coast to Baltimore. So when we get back, we got beautiful games and beautiful days. Because I want some good weather, gang. Today is dark, cold, and rainy. I feel like I'm in Kansas City the past 3 days. Really. So, a couple topics to end the episode with. First is the birthday bird. Oriole Bird had his birthday yesterday. Just want to give a little shout out to one of the best mascots in all of baseball, all time. In 1979, he hatched out of a giant egg. April 6, 1979. It was his 46th birthday yesterday, I believe. I did that math correctly. I did it in my head. I didn't use anything. I hope that's the right number. We're going to go with the 46th birthday. And he's one of the best mascots in baseball. To me, he's right up there. Maybe at the best. I would say top 2, 3, obviously. My heart is also in that. Some of the other ones I love, though, are the Philly Fanatic, who has been voted time and time again, I believe, as the top mascot in maybe all of sports. And he's great. Him and the bird have very similar characteristics at times and mannerisms, and I kind of associate the two on the same level personally. But some of my other favorite ones, I don't know how the rest of people rank them, are Bernie Brewer, the Brewers mascot, always fun. Mr. and Mrs. Met are a classic. You have the Friar out there in San Diego. Wally the Green Monster is, I think, one of the most slept-on mascots. Kind of cool. Although I did see the Red Sox home run celebration is them putting a Wally head on in the dugout. And it's really funny. But you want to talk about one of those celebrations that I doubt you can actually get to a World Series doing. And I know it has no correlation But sometimes, again, I've said this before, you look at some of these dugout celebrations and you go, it's funny, but you're never going to win a championship doing that. And again, it's so stupid because the Orioles have the fishing pole and whatever else. All I know is that to me feels like one that's not going to go deep into the playoffs. Whereas the Orioles have stuff that always has felt the past couple years like it could go deep into the playoffs. And the last one is Lou Seal, the Giants mascot. Also, I think gets slept on when you're talking about the best mascots. All right, gang, so we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to get through this a little quickly, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's been the talk of Major League Baseball to begin this season, torpedo bats. And at first it was kind of just viewed as being like, oh, the Yankees are the only ones using this, when really the Orioles had gotten their hands on some of these last year. They weren't using them yet, but they'd gotten their hands on it last year. In fact, I'm sure they're not the only team to have gotten their hands on it. Now, other players and teams are also using it. In fact, it seems like Adley Rutschman has been using one all season. So, a little surprising there. Everybody blamed the Yankees for it, which, listen, I love hating the Yankees. I love the Yankees hate. But other teams have been on it too. Like I said, Adley has been using it and trying it. Others have tried it. Adley seems to have good success. And a lot of this is introduced to the Orioles, at least, through assistant GM Sig Medoll. And he's just such a smart guy and always working the numbers. It seems like Adley's bat isn't as thick as some of these variations, but he does like it. In fact, his company, I forget who he uses bat-wise, sent him a few different variations that he tried, some thicker, some thinner. He's got one that I guess is a little more normal looking, but still has a slight torpedo to it. It seems like it's here to stay, though. Rob Manfred said that they're here to stay and that they're good for baseball. He also randomly talked about using robot umps by next year, but that's something that we'll get to in another episode. I can't touch on robot umps right now. So when you look or talk to Cody Ash, Orioles hitting coach, he talked about how bats are now going to get specifically designed for players' swings and how that's the next progression of hitting. And it makes sense. They're using these AI and computer-generated programs to figure out these things. In fact, the Orioles have partnered with Johns Hopkins research to analyze bats with AI. They're using computer vision to improve custom bat designs, analyzing the full profile of the bat, knob to barrel, every bit of it, because they were talking even just adjusting a knob or something for certain players based off of their swing and their angles could have a major effect in how this actually, or how they're able to perform with that bat. Essentially just tailoring bats more effectively to players' needs. The AI can quickly analyze the data where before it would take hours for these people to do this. In fact, the Orioles have talks underway with Johns Hopkins University to create a lab at Oriole team facilities. So they can get these guys in this AI lab and have them swing and have the computer go through all of these different variants of size and shape, bat and weight and all of this and figure out what the most effective and best bat is for that player. It's amazing stuff, gang. It's the future. We're in the future. Sig Medoll is brilliant. The Orioles seem to be one of these teams that's ahead of the curve in all of this, in the analytics, in the AI, in all of this tech. And it's a great thing, gang, because you can't go wrong with more information. It never hurts going a little old school baseball and thinking about something in an older way. But as long as you're open to listening to the advice of the AI, seeing what the computers spit out, what the analytics tell you, and kind of finding a happy middle ground and finding what works best, not only for you, but for the franchise. And hopefully, all of this is going to find its way to a World Series trophy for us, gang. That's what I think. That's what I think is coming our way. The Commissioner's Trophy at some point. World Series trophy. We're going to get it. Hopefully this year, gang. Either way, a little turbulent, rocky start. A lot of good things on this episode. I love the episode we just had. Fantastic episode. I can't stop saying it because truly, I love it. It was fantastic. I love it as always, gang. You know I love sitting here talking Orioles baseball with you. I'll see you back Thursday. Remember, episodes every Monday and Thursday. Check out our TikTok. Check out our Instagram. Reach out. Send comments. Send questions. Interact with us, and we'll interact with you back. All right? As for now, that's going to wrap up this episode. It was episode 47, KC BarBQ'd. Hopefully we do a lot better in the desert these next 3 games, and I can't wait to get back to Baltimore, or the team to get back to Baltimore. Neither here or there, guys. Very excited for what's to come. Hopefully a great series. Again, check us out Thursday. We'll have our next episode. Have a fantastic start to your week. And like always, let's go O's!